Good morning, grade 9. And this morning, we are going to deal with the activity that I informed you last time, which is poetry reading. The selection that will be read is the one that was also presented in class, and that selection is the one authored by no other than the great William Shakespeare, and the title of the selection is The Seven Ages of Man. Last week, I gave a possible way by which the lines or the verses of the poem can actually be read. Sorry, oh my God, can actually be read. I'm not saying that the style that I presented to you last time should be also be your style. You can of course have your own, but let us not forget these following tips. You might want to consider them, but then again, poetic license would allow you to have your own style for the purpose of art and creativity. Then again, we must not forget a few of these tips. First, when we read verses in poetry, we read them in thought units. What does that mean? Just because a verse has been cut, meaning they've been divided into 2 or 3 lines, doesn't mean that you'll pause at the end of every line. We need to remind ourselves that in poetry, we actually have regular statements or expressions that have only just been presented in poetic form, in verse form. Therefore, each of these verses represents a regular sentence in grammar. And that sentence speaks for one thought unit. Let me give you an example. Let's go to that poem entitled The Seven Ages of Man. What I'll do first is to read a verse which others might feel like reading. However, it might not be the right way to read it. For instance, this one. All the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. So that's supposedly when one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. That's just actually one regular sentence in grammar. The presentation is just in verse form. When we say that lines are going to be read in thought units, we are going to remind ourselves of the fact that what was just read by me is a regular sentence. We do not read it as all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. His act being 7 ages, at first the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face creeping like a snail, unwillingly to school, and then the lover. We do not read the lines that way. Another thing that I really, really hate in poetry reading, just allow me to tell you this. I hate this so much. Yes, call it whatever you want, but I think you just have to know that I really hate it when someone recites or reads a line in poetry by putting in some tune. I hate it so much when someone follows the na 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 na. If someone recites or reads a verse in poetry that way, I would not know what to do. I could probably make my fingers pass through the camera and poke you on the head. I hope that during the break, during the weekend, when you practiced reading your lines, I'm really hoping that not one from you tried to read the lines that way, because that's not how lines in poetry should be read. Perhaps that's what we were told. We were told back when we were in elementary, back when we were in our younger years. But now it's the time that we should be told that that style won't go a long way. It might have worked with some Filipino works before, as in the case of Pag-ibig sa Tinubuang Lupa. Does everybody know the selection? It's a Filipino poem in Filipino 8. It's supposed to be in Filipino 8. Familiar? Pag-ibig sa Tinubuang Lupa? I don't know, probably you've heard of people say it as, aling pag-ibig pa ang hihigit kaya sa pagkadalisay at pagkadakila, gaya ng pag-ibig sa sariling lupa. God, please don't do that style here. Don't ever bring that style here. And then, let's be reminded as well of the rubric that I've shown to you, the one that I've sent to them. Did you forward the rubric to your classmates? Okay, so has everybody seen the rubric, the guide for the poetry reading, as well as, I think that rubric also works well for poetry recitation. That rubric might also serve for poetry recitation. However, the fact remains that there are areas in that rubric which might not actually work for this kind of setup. The volume is fine. The volume element of the rubric is fine. For one to speak clearly, of course, that also counts. Preparedness, that also comes out. Enthusiasm, as defined, coming from vocal intonation. Okay, it also can be seen. It can also be heard. The rate of speech, the speed by which verses or lines are actually going to be read. We can feel that. We also have the last part, listens to other presentations. That's more or less a sign that you are respecting your classmates' performance, that whenever they do their share of poetry reading or poetry recitation, you'll give your ears to listen to them. However, my concern would be for this part, posture and eye contact. As you can see, so many or quite a number of your classmates have not turned on their camera, because if they do, I don't know, but perhaps when they turn their cameras on, it could probably interfere with the connectivity, with the internet connection that they have at home. I think I can forego with that element of the rubric. Therefore, we'll be left with 6 criteria. These 6 criteria are volume, speaks clearly or clarity of speech, preparedness, enthusiasm, the rate of speech, as well as attention or attention to others' presentation or listens to other presentations. And then we are now going to start. Anybody? In terms of the number of points, by the way, I'd like to change 4 being the highest and 1 being the lowest for with 5 now and 2 being the lowest. So it's 5, 4, 3, 2. It's not 4, 3, 2, 1. Therefore, the highest number of points that a student can earn for this activity is 30 points. 6 criteria, maximum number of points is 30. So yeah. Who would like to begin and try to volunteer? Anybody would like to volunteer? Let's be honest, who practiced their turn last night during the break, during the weekend? I think the student with a new laptop tried to really practice. I bet he did. Right, Trixley?
No, sir.
That's what your mother told me that you did. So I'd like to start with, wait, others are still entering the class. To those who just got in, I'd like to check your audio. Alessandra, can you hear me well? Alessandra? Alessandra's frame has frozen. Alessandra? Okay, I think she can't hear us. What about Mad. Mad. Mad, can't you hear me? Hero. Hero. Can the others hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
So what seems to be the problem with the others? In the case of those who did not respond while when I tried to call them. Ahmad, I'd like to hear from you, Ahmad. It's not that I'm the only one that's being heard. I would prefer that you say something so that we can see how your audio is going to be perceived by us. Mad? He's not saying anything at all. Hero, what about Hero? Hero can't hear us. Jamie? Jamie?
Yes, sir.
Can you say something else?
Good morning, sir.
Try to say a longer line, Jamie, because that will tell me if your line really is choppy or not. The words "yes, sir" probably aren't enough as a gauge to see for us to hear whether your line is fine or not.
Oh my God.
Jamie, Jamie,
Sige, I was. Oh my God. What did I say?
I can't hear anything from Jamie now. What about Kenan? Kenan, I can't also hear anything from Kenan. So these people, uh, who are they again? You have Alessandra, Mad. For a while, I'm writing their names. Jamie, Hero. I'm writing down the names of students whose internet connections aren't working well because I'll give them a different task later on. Kim has decided to volunteer. So Kim, I'd like to give the floor to you. By the way, when we do poetry recitation or when we do poetry reading, it does not mean that you will be bland with the expressions that come to be shown from your face. Poetry reading is still an avenue for one to express whatever necessary gesture or expression should be expressed. Kim, the floor is yours.
The Seven Ages of Man by William Shakespeare, a narrative style of poem written in free verse style. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being seven ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face creeping like a snail, unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace, with the woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pod, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly, with good capon lined, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances. And so he plays his parts. The sixth age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon. With spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful host well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank. And his big manly voice turning again toward childish trouble, pipes and whistles in a sound. last scene of all that ends this strange, eventful history is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything.
Thank you, Kim. Let's give Kim a round of applause. May I know, Kim, what gave you the idea of delivering it that way so that your classmates may also be given a thought on how they might want to deliver it?
Ano, sir, it's like I was inspired by the thought that we all come to a certain point, which is death, and we just have to pass through the seven ages of man, which was stated in the poem, and we have to feel every circumstances and like the feeling that is given by the lines in each of the seven ages, so that we could like deliver them and like ano sir, like express them in that way.
So, if I'm not mistaken, the idea is you are trying to situate yourself in the persona, and each persona you got from the seven ages. One
So,
persona for the infancy stage up to the last persona, which is the senescent stage. Others, it's quite obvious. You would have probably noticed how there are a lot of variations have been presented in the voice. In the voice alone, a lot of variations have been presented by Kim to reflect a particular age as presented in the selection. I'm not saying that others need to do that style of Kim. That's Kim's version of poetry reading. That's his interpretation, and that's fine. I'd like to thank you, by the way, Kim, for giving us that style. Thank you for giving us that style.
you're
This
welcome,
is
sir.
my first time, though, to hear that style. I have to also share this to you. This is my first time to hear that style because the style that have been shown to me before, this is not also the first time that I've asked students to recite this selection. The style that I've seen from students before was to keep the yeah, the projection is similar to the age or reflective of the age that students actually have, but it's just a matter of how they played with the lines, not necessarily with having an inflection when it comes to the volume where one sounds like a child and the other one really sounds like a strong man or a bigger man, and then someone who sounds like a soldier, not necessarily in that manner, but your presentation, Kim, also stands out. Thank you for that. Anybody else would like to volunteer? See, if you just volunteer, you are done with this. You have already done your part for this one. But I also have to tell you ahead of time, this is not the only poem that you're actually going to recite for us. There's one that I'll assign later on, and there's another one that you will have to choose for yourself. The Seven Ages of Man is a selection that is presented in class, and so you are going to read it. I gave my style on reading it, which could be a guide for others, while others can also have their own. The second selection that I'll give is one where I'd like to I'd like to give you the chance to discover the way it's going to be read. The last selection, or the third selection, is one which is of your own choice. You'll choose a poem out of the many that are available online or in books, and then you're going to recite or read it to us. Next to, if no one volunteers, then I'll start calling people. I will now call Raf.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Raf.
Seven Ages of Man by William Shakespeare. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. His acts being seven ages. At, at first the infant, mewling and puking at the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like a snail, unwi- creeping like a snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made of the mistress' eyebrow. Then the soldier, full of strange oaths, and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in their round belly, with good cap and line, with eyes severed and beard like formal cut, full of wise sauce and modern instances, and so he plays his parts. Sixth age shifts into the lean and slippered pantalon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side. His youthful host well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk sank, and his big manly voice, turning again toward childish treble, pipes and whistles in sound. Last scene of all, that ends this changeful eventful history, is second childish and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, and sans everything.
Okay, thank you, Raf. Thank you. Raf, I just want to also know, please don't take any offense with this question. Are you feeling all right today?
Um, yeah, sir.
Oh, okay. I thought you're not feeling well because it kind of sounded, there were parts that I was worried to where it sounded as though you were not, I don't know, it felt to me like it was not really the kind of modulation that I was hoping for these particular lines. Anyway, there's another chance later on. I hope that you'd find the time to listen to this recording. Each of you would find the time to listen to this recording so that you would also know how you really sounded. From there, you can gauge whether you've been satisfied or not of the performance that you have already presented. Next would be Vem. I'm just calling you according to the arrangement of the frames that I have on my computer. Vem, your turn.
I'll start now, sir.
Yes, please.
Okay. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have direct seats and entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy, with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like a snail, unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress' eyebrow. Then the soldier, full of strange oaths, and bearded like a pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly, with good cape and line, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise sauce and modern incenses. And so he plays his part. The sixth age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles and nose, and pouch and side. His youthful host was saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice, turning again toward childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all that ends the strange eventful history is second childishness and mere oblivion, sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. The 7 Ages of Man by William Shakespeare.
Thank you, Vem. Thank you, Vem. Congratulations for having succeeded your turn already. Earlier, when Vem started, I actually wanted to pause her because she did not mention the title. She did not mention the title at the start of her delivery. But I then told myself that I think it's unfair for me to just make her stop because it might throw her off. The danger is if I stopped her, she might have been thrown off from that plan of delivery that she already prepared for these lines. And then later on, I realized, while she was continually delivering the lines, I realized that perhaps there is another time by which she'll mention the title. And true enough, she placed it at the end of her performance. The title still came out. And that's fine. That's totally fine. Thank you, Vem. What
Rules.
uh, what gave you
Men
the idea, Vem, of delivering it that way?
have exits and entrances.
Same with Kent, sir, like placing yourself as the one, really like you'd consider yourself as the one talaga referred in the poem.
See, that matters so much. There is though a tendency in literature, in literature writing and literature reading, there might be a tendency for one to find him or herself related or connected to the selection being read. At some point, others would even feel the emotions to the to the to the brim of crying or feeling the pain the character is experiencing or the persona is experiencing in that literary work. This is seen though as a fallacy. We term that as the affective fallacy in literature. The affective fallacy is a tendency for people to get the emotions from the selection, to understand the emotions, and to place themselves in these emotions. But actually, that would help them understand the selection more. Though you are not really crying here, I mean, you don't have to cry in this selection. It does not really demand that you purge out so many emotions coming from you in relation to the selection, but it pays so much to really place yourself in the selection that you are actually reading. And that gives you an idea on how you should properly read it. Thank you, Ben. Next, another one volunteered. We have Ken. Go, Ken.
The Seven Ages of Man by William Shakespeare, a narrative type of poem. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. And one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first, the infant, his mewling and puking in the nurse's arms. And then the whining schoolboy, with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like a snail, unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad, made to his mistress's eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths, and bearded like the pard. Jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly, with good capon lined, with eye severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances. And so he plays his part. The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side. His youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again toward childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all, that ends this strange, eventful history, is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you. The inspiration, Ken, where did that come from? I mean, the idea on how to deliver it.
Uh, the idea was based off a video that I saw on YouTube. I kind of liked the style of how he read it, so I decided to adapt his way of saying the poem.
Okay. So you've got the chance, you grab the chance of listening to a way by which the poem is actually read online. Yeah, others have also learned their styles of reading poetry in that style that Ken has just told us or shared to us this morning. They might want to listen to so many readers out there, and then from these styles, they could choose a style which they would want to adapt. Thank you. Kathy has also volunteered. Let's now give the chance of the floor to Kathy.
The Seven Ages of Man by William Shakespeare.
For a while, Kat. Sorry, Kat. If it's all right, can you turn your camera on? To those who will be called, I hope you will grant me the chance of seeing you. Though I understand it's really difficult for some that their internet connections might interfere with the strength of their internet connectivity. Oh yeah, turning the camera on, sorry, might interfere with the strength of their internet connections. But if you grant me, I hope that you could grant me the chance of seeing you while you deliver or read the poem to us. Kat, again, sorry for the interruption. The floor is now yours.
The Seven Ages of Man by William Shakespeare. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy, with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly with good cape and lined, with eye severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances. And so he plays his part. The sixth age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side. His youthful host well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big, manly voice, turning again towards childish trouble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all, sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything.
Um, can everybody hear me now? Something actually happened to the internet connection earlier. I was suddenly cut off. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Kath?
Yes, sir.
Kathy?
Yes, sir.
Um, there was a part in your presentation can you read the last, can you, for because I was cut off. I don't know what happened to the internet connection. Can you recite to me the last part again for the last stage?
Which one, sir? The sixth age?
The seventh one.
The seventh? The last?
The last, yes.
Okay. Start, sir.
Yes, please.
Last scene of all, that ends this strange, eventful history. The second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything.
Thank you so much, Kat. When I got cut off, all that I could just do was to imagine how the last part sound. It's just that part that was cut off. And yes, my imagination really matched with how you actually just said it now. May I know, Kath, why the last part? I'd like to focus on the last part. May I know from you how why the last part came to be projected in that manner?
Because I knew the meaning of Sanser was without,
Without, yes.
and I wanted to portray that um, that feeling without the sense of taste, sight. I wanted to show it or express it in that manner.
The feeling of eventually losing, not having anymore, the sense of sight, taste, and the last word is everything, where the person has reached of not anymore having everything, as the person eventually meets death or reaches a moment of dying. And that came out with how the voice of Kathy was played at the last part. So those who have heard her clearly, you could see that the transition in the voice of Kathy from someone who spoke quite directly and strongly at the start, and then eventually got the voices wavered to pauses and gap to eventually having pauses and longer gaps, especially when reaching the last part. As that gap will in the meaning of the poem, as that gap will then reach a termination, the person will then die. And that came out in the delivery of Kathy. So see, it pays when you have now really understood and embraced what the selection has been trying to teach us. From there, you would know how to pace yourself. The pacing, which is one of the criteria, you would know how to pace yourself and how your voice is to be projected. Thank you, Kath. Next to Kathy, we have another volunteer, and that's Spencer. Spencer has sent a private message in the chat box telling me that he'd want to perform next to Kathy because the internet connection later on might be slow. So Spencer, I would like to give the floor to you now.
Can you hear me now, sir?
Yes, 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 go. Spencer, can you turn your camera on? Is it going to interrupt though with the internet?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that will do.
The Seven Ages of Man by William Shakespeare. All the world is stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy, with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like a snail, unwilling to school. And then the lover, sighing like a furnace, with a woeful bulb made to his mistress' eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths, and bearded like a pard, jealous in honor, sudden, quick and quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly with good cape unlined, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise sauce and modern instances. And so he plays his part. His 6 age shifts into lean slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side. His youthful host will save a world too wide for his shrunk, and his big mellow voice, turned again toward childish treble, pipes and whistle in his sound. Last scene of all, that ends this strange eventful history, in second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything.
Thank you,
Answer.
Spencer. Because Spencer did not turn his camera on, all that I can do is imagine. That's why earlier I tried to close my eyes. I tried to imagine how Spencer was actually projecting the lines, but still it was not that easy for me because I have not also known Spencer that long. So I could not, I cannot also try to project in my imagination, the expressions that Spencer was supposed to project, or that was he was actually projecting at home. But I would actually hope, yeah, I'm actually hoping that perhaps by next time Spencer could turn on his camera so that we can then see him perform. Sorry, sir. Okay, Spencer is saving the MB of his internet. It's all right. Al, thank you, Spencer. Thank you. Let's go with Al. Al has expressed his
Hello?
willingness to volunteer.
Hello?
Al, if it's all right with you, Al, can you go somewhere where your face can be seen? Yeah, the light seems to be better there, in that manner.
Hello?
Yes, Al.
Start na, sir.
Yes, please.
The Seven Ages of Man by William Shakespeare. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. His acts, being seven ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy, with his satchel and shining morning face creeping like a snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress' eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths, and bearded like the part, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly, with good capon lined, with eyes severe, and beard of formal cut, full of wise sauce and modern instances. And so he plays his part. The sixth age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side. His youthful host, well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again toward childish treble, pipes, and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything.
Thank you, Al. Thank you so much, Al. Anyone else who'd like to volunteer? Since no one would like to volunteer now, I'll continue calling in students for them to deliver the selection. I'll now go with Chelsea. Chelsea, your turn. Chelsea. Hello? Hello? What happened? Hello?
And one, please.
Chelsea?
Yes, sir.
Okay, your turn. Your turn now, Chelsea.
The Seven Ages of Man by William Shakespeare. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women are merely players. And they have their exits and entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being seven ages. At first the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy, with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like a snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress' eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths, and bearded like pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly with good capon line, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances. So he plays his part. The sixth age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side. His youthful hose well saved and a world too wide for a shrunk shank, and his big manly voice, turning it toward childish trouble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all, that ends this strange eventful history, is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything.
Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you so much. We now go with Trixley.
Yes, sir. Start na, sir.
Yes, please.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah.
The Seven Ages of Man by William Shakespeare. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being seven ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy, with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like a snail, unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress' eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths, and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly with good capon line, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws instances, and so he plays many parts. The sixth age shift into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side. His youthful host will save a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turned again toward childish treble, pipes and whistle in his sound. Last scene of all, that ends this strange and eventful history, a second childishness and merely oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything.
Thank you, Trixley. Thank you so much. We now go with Kent. Kent? Kent, not King. Kent. Barsinilia. I'm just calling names based on the arrangement of the frames. Hero, Natalia have internet problems, so next to Trixley would be Kent. Kent? Now he can't also say it. I'll call Marl. Hello, Marl. Marl. What about the others? Vem, can you hear me, Vem? I think Vem can't hear me.
Choppy, sir.
Ken, can you hear me, Ken?
Choppy.
Internet connection in IA is so poor. What about now?
I
Can
think
you hear
it's
me now? Okay. Marl, your turn.
the others.
Marl.
Useful host will say the word to
How many have read already? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9. How many are you? 27. So 18 students have yet to deliver the, no, 26. 17 students have yet to read the poem to us. Marl? Corinne? Corinne, your turn. Hello, Corinne? Corinne can't hear me. Can everybody else hear me? Can you hear me, people? Choppy. What about Al? Can you hear me clearly, Al? Al?